Welcome back to another Fabric Tip Friday. I know it's been a while since I've put a few out. It's been kind of hectic here. I have actually been applying a few hanger floors with our hard deck system and been in and out of town, and last couple weeks weather's been crazy. Actually today we've had single digit weather here with about 10 inches of snow, so the shipping is all messed up, so it's got me in a situation to where I'm trying to get customers' product out, to where they're not held up and anything. So I decided I'd take some of this time to get back on with a Fabric Tip Friday. And the way I choose them is I go by my phone calls into AirTech Coatings to get my ideas. It sometimes can get to a point that I don't run out of ideas, but it's kind of hard to scratch your head and figure out something to do that may not be going on in the next door shop, or something that I can do or show you without setting a bunch of stuff up. So with that in mind, if y'all like these type videos, and follow on Instagram or share the Facebook page with us and kind of follow along there, and then throw in a comment of something that you'd like to see. I know that I own AirTech Coatings and I promote that, but I've covered with all the systems, and a lot of these things that I show works on about every system. But be in mind, you have to follow their procedures. I mean, you take the Stewart system, that's an entirely different type system. So there's things that you would need to do a little different because it's water-based, but as far as the actual application of fabric and the different things we do, the Superflight system, the systems that Consolidated has, all of these, they all are kind of in the same family. So a lot of times we share things back and forth as far as the way we do things, not to really get off subject of being legal, but you learn something from one or the other, and everyone has little different ways of doing them. The things that I show on these Fabric Tip Fridays doesn't mean this is the written in stone. It's just the easy way that we found to do it, and every now and then I find an easier way to do it, and I jump on board with that. If it's anything faster to get the airplane out for the customer where we're charging by the hour, I'm all for that. So follow us on Instagram, and just put just little things on there, like something that you like to see that either you're having trouble with. A lot of this stuff is redundant, but what I hope is a new guy that's never covered before, that everybody has told him it's this mysterious witchcraft stuff, to let them know that it's not that hard if you do it right. And having something like the Instagram or the Facebook to show people, I'm the type person, if I'm showed something, if I can see it, I can learn it better than trying to read the instruction in a book. And that's what I hope carries across in these videos. There's nothing professional about this. I don't like the way I sound on video, anything like that, but if it can help another person and further my AirTech Coatings with the service that we provide there, that's what I'm out to do. To start with, the one I'm gonna do today is, I've kind of covered some of this before, but had actually 2 calls this week, and I'm gonna call it when to prime, or what to prime. They'll call and they'll start talking about priming something, and they don't understand where I have to stop them, and I say, what are we talking about priming? And they'll say, well, you're a primer. Well, we have fabric primer, our PFU 1030, and we have an epoxy primer in several colors, and we actually have one that's in a color of the kind of the zinc chromate color. That's an epoxy primer. So I have to get it clear on what we're doing, and many times people won't read the instruction. They'll think it says fabric primer covering a fabric airplane. That boot cowl is on a fabric airplane, so I'm going to use that, primer. Our primer, and I know this is, people's not going to believe me, and I did not believe this before I bought AirTech. I thought they're using some kind of a primer, XYZ, that works great, and they've tested it. We actually have our primer made. Mr. Mack was a chemical engineer, and he worked with another company. They come up with what they wanted to see, and our fabric primer is designed to go in the fabric and hold on to the fabric, and actually chemically adhere to the tops of the tapes where you have glued down your tapes. The dried surface is an open porous, ready for paint. If you wait a certain length of time, you need to rough that to get the mechanical bond there. That ain't to say that if I roughed up this aluminum and I used that primer, I've tested it before. I have guys call, I'm doing something in fiberglass. Want your flexible primer work for that since it's fiberglass? Well, since it's fiberglass, yes, it's flexible, but it's not doing like fabric is. And there's been people that has told me it works great. I did the cowling with your primer, and man, it worries me that there's nothing been tested on my end that they've all of a sudden put together their $150,000 decathlon, and all of a sudden something's coming off in sheets or something, and I wasn't backing that process to do that. I tell people, if it's a new cowling or something, go to your local. They got primers called a 2K primer or something for fiberglass, but we have an epoxy primer that's a 2-part primer that works great in those situations. I just had some things going on today. I have fitted the cowling for my plane. I used Selkirk's cows because they already had a mold for Super Cub, and many of y'all know what I'm building. I'm trying to build a super light, not a purpose-built STOL airplane contest, but a super light one that really performs well, because if you make it light, then that's free horsepower as far as I'm concerned. So they had a nice cow that I wanted to try out, and if you don't know what primer, don't take a chance and just reprime, because we don't know what someone sends us. Everybody has seen the Univera lift struts, fine product, and they're steel, and when they leave the factory, they need to protect them somewhere. They're not gonna send them in raw primer. And they got that red oxide color primer on it, and you see prints of stamps on them and different things. And I'll admit, in the past, I have roughed that up and shot paint right on it. That's actually not a good idea. Don and Ron Wade at C&D, if y'all look at some of their videos, he had one on doing the lift struts. They actually wipe them down and strip them back and come back with an epoxy. I think they're using our epoxy primer now. I have roughed them up and put the epoxy primer over that, but you're only as good as what's under it. And they're just trying to get them to the customer. These parts from Selkirk is carbon fiber, and everybody knows what carbon fiber looks like. A lot of times if it's put in a mold, whether it's a fiberglass cowl or whatever, it's got a gel coat usually sprayed down first. And sometimes a colored gel coat looks like a, you know, if they're really doing a nice job, it looks like it's some kind of a primer, and oh, I'm gonna rough that up and paint right on it. Well, they put grease or wax on that to get it out of the mold. You're literally trying to paint something that has had wax down in the pores. So you really need to make sure the gel coat, you wanna prime that with something and rough it up, clean it with a solvent, get it really clean, wax-free. This particular cowling, it looks to me as they have did a really nice finished out job of some kind of a light gray primer. I bet if I called them, it would be a primer that I recognize, and I'd be sticking my thumb up and go, hey, I'm painting right over that. Well, our fabric primer is a really light beige, and I tell everybody, don't use our gray primer, because you paint a yellow J3 over those two colors, you will see a difference in the color. You need them close to the same. So we have a white primer, and I'll do a white primer over this. But the big thing is if you don't know what they used, you're putting a lot of time and a lot of money into this thing, and you just don't know what they used. I'm not saying that Selkirk, they probably use very good material. I mean, some of the things I looked at on this, I was really impressed with where they already put the nut plates in the carbon fiber, the way it went in and everything. Probably a very good product, but as some things go, cheapest is what they're gonna use. And all of a sudden you're building a $150,000 airplane and you're putting expensive paint, whether it's AirTech or whatever, over Krylon. You just don't know what they're using. So rough it up, see what's under it, see if it comes off easy with MEK or acetone or something. And like in a situation with this, I have done a lot of die grinding and gonna put my fasteners and everything in. I'll rough this up with say 320 over a foam block or something to get a good mechanical edge. Our epoxy primer, I never say that we're better than somebody else or whatever, but I will say, since we have a catalyst, and it is the bad one, you know, that you don't want to breathe it, you use a respirator. Our temperature yesterday morning was 1 degree. I've seen that kind of temperature before, but today the high was 19, and it's snowing. It has snowed 3 inches in the last 3 hours. Our paint booth is outside and it's not heated. It's an actual under a shed, Bink style paint booth. I'll prime these this afternoon in 16-degree weather. it will take maybe an extra day to get fully cured like I want. So with that said, our primers and even our fabric primers and our paints, it just takes longer to cure. But I will shoot our epoxy 1600 right on this product, and if everything sands back, that will be the base that I'll lay my primer on. Then I'll rough the primer one time before I paint. Some of the other things that you'll see as far as knowing when and what to do, I showed these before. These are the lift struts that Alaska Airframes has put out. Very fine quality. I was looking at saving weight. Yes, I do have to keep down at an 1,800 pound gross, but if I'm going to make my airplane be 125 pounds lighter, I've pretty well eat up that 2,200 pound gross that some of them go to. So in my personal plane, I don't mind keeping the gross weight at 1,800. So I went with these struts because I saved about 15 pounds. And I've heard several people, you can treat this several ways. I actually seen where Acme is building the sweepstakes plane where he talks about just gonna leave them this color. That's fine, keep them clean, they won't corrode, you know, they're fine like that. But if you're gonna paint this aluminum, you've got the people that will rough it up a little. They'll do an acid etch, they'll do an iodine liquid solution, which puts a little bit of and it's all for protection from corrosion. Then we go directly on with the epoxy primer. Or I see a lot of the RV guys just go ahead and rough the aluminum, you know, rough it up a little, say with 320 or 400, just enough to fog the shine of it. And you can go directly with our epoxy primer. You see this end in here that's kind of gold colored. That is a type of an anodized coating for a corrosion protection. That could be painted and everything, but you know, like I've showed on the Keller flaps or the stove flaps, they have some of these parts. I'm just leaving them that color because they just look good and it just looks like a piece of fine art. I'll probably take this off and just leave it gold. I can always, if I see some situation happening later, take them off and put a primer on them if I think they're gonna corrode or something. But that's one treatment that you wouldn't really, I don't think that you would need to prime if they're done that way, unless you are looking at, you don't want to see that yellow color. Then you're gonna need to paint them, and I would put a little bit of primer on top of that anodized before I painted them. That ain't to say that you couldn't paint that, but that is really slick, and that anodizing is slick. You want some kind of a bite there, and like I said on our fabric primer, it's made to bite and hold the fabric itself, and I don't think it probably does have the characteristics, but it's not really made for metal. So the epoxy primer would actually bite in, but you want to rough that up just a little bit. So I will probably just fog these, shoot them with a 1600, and then I'll be ready to paint, you know, and I'll probably put a couple days in between them and just lightly fog it with some Scotch pad or something, and then I'll paint those. One other thing that I'm going to do on this plane, I went with these wheels from Behringer. Quality is there. I like them. It does have this big sleeve that I didn't save as much weight as I thought I was going to save, but I did save weight over a magnesium, much less over an aluminum style wheel. So I'm trying to save all the weight I can. I like the way it's got the floating disc brake and everything, but it's red. And I talked to them and they said, well, from overseas, they can get the anodized in any color. I was going to look at gray. Well, I'm getting kind of close here, and they were looking at 3 months, you know, to get them over, you know, and get the order in. And if it's like everything else, 3 months can turn into 4 months, can turn into 5. So they had these in stock. I said, send them to me. So these are an anodized, so I'm going to need to change this color. I'm not going to paint that. I'm going to prime it. So it's, you know, one of them questions. It doesn't need priming for corrosion. It's already protected, but I will scuff it a little bit, and then I will put a coat of primer so that I know it's going to hold my paint. And I'll probably go to my local guy who does all my work, the little Behringer, you know, the way they've put that on. I'm going to get him to make me another one of those, a sticker, because I want to advertise, you know, they've got a good product. And then when I'll probably pick one of the colors of the plane to match in here, and I'm going to go ahead and put that back to make it look like a factory type setup. But like this part that's anodized and this part, question on priming, you're not going to need to prime because it's protected. But if you're going to paint it, either you're going to need to rough that and put a primer or something on it, something so that your paint can hold on. Our book says after a couple days, I think actually if you go out to about a week or so, then you need to rough sand it, because it just goes ahead and cures to a hard, our epoxy gets to a hard point that you're afraid the paint may not take a natural chemical bite. You want to sand on it. And if you paint like I do, you got so much imperfections, you're going to want to sand it anyhow. You're going to have some issue somewhere. So that's kind of a long video, but as far as when to prime and when not to prime, and people get it mixed up, they think a primer's a primer. And, you know, the 1030 primer for our fabric is for fabric, you know, and I want to always keep that separate on what the primer is for. You get into some companies like PPG, they'll go into different primers that need to be scuffed or sanded or etched. You know, there's different levels of that. You know, if you're painting stainless, you know, some of them you'll do a certain thing to stainless and you got 55 minutes to get the primer on. If not, you have to redo it, you know, and we're getting into some pretty critical situations, and on this stuff, you want it to not corrode, but we're not as critical as, you know, some parts that's going to space or something really critical like that. You just want to protect it. So follow us, like us, and follow us on Instagram, or like us on Facebook, share it. Just want to get it around, and if you have an idea for a Fabric Tip Friday, throw it in there and we'll look at it. We'll hopefully get to doing one on all of them. I'm going to start going to some other shops. I know I've been saying that before, but going to start going to some other shops and getting some other ideas from people on the way they do strictly covering. I know this is not covering, but you know, it's part of it. You have to do all of it to get to the point of starting to put the cover on. Thank you.